Okay, so if a random person asked us what the main, say, 5 character flaws or shortcomings of our personality that are tripping us up on our spiritual journey, I bet most of us wouldn't have an answer for that. Which is interesting, right? It kind of reveals how unserious we are about the whole thing, right? Like, obviously, we want to make sure that we are not the problem. Nevertheless, we always are. So let's see if we can maybe come up with some kind of sophisticated response to this challenge, shall we? So like any adventurer entering a strange land, we of course want to read the terrain. We want to enhance as far as possible our chance of survival and success in this strange land. And so we do that, of course, by imagining what kinds of traps we might meet so that we can meet these traps prepared with the necessary tools and with a plan of what to do once crisis arises. And especially on the inner journey, right? Because on the inner journey, the traps are inside of us. And it's these little fuckers that will trip us up on this journey. And so by knowing our shortcomings, or at least the main shortcomings that most often tends to trip us up, we can avoid becoming the fool that just walks from one trap into the next. They're all internal, right? We bring the traps. The trap is us. They might range from, say, egoic dynamics like reductive identity investments that keeps us in certain stories that we prefer to tell about ourselves, but which are not in accordance with reality. It might be things like limiting beliefs that lead us into a certain illusory understanding of reality, which makes it difficult for us to move ahead. It may be obsolete coping strategies that made sense at the time when we constructed them, often in childhood, but which serve us no longer, or which have maybe even become like the thing tripping us up. It might be the fear of letting go of parts of us that no longer serve us. It might be the fear of merely seeing ourselves as we really are, or simply just a lacking sense of deserving, which leads to things like self-sabotage. There can be many, many, many traps and reasons for these traps. And luckily, despite all of us being very much alike, we are still individuals. And so any YouTube video cannot tell you what your traps are. You have to do the work of finding out, obviously. And here we come up against an interesting paradox, right? Because for most of us, the understanding that we ourselves are the trap can seem very counterproductive, right? It can kind of lull us into this feeling of detrimental absurdity, right? If we might get this feeling that if I'm the trap, like I'm not very far on my spiritual journey, if I'm the one fucking it up for myself. But the thing is, we all are. We have to be, because the traps necessarily on the inner journey has to be inside of us, which means they are us. But here's the catch. Finding out that we are the problem is a blessing in disguise, right? Because while it might seem quite negative and absurd on the outside, the fact that we are the problem implies necessarily that we too are the solution. Which means that all of the powers to solve this challenge are also within ourselves. And so we always have to remember that it's a blessing to discover that we are the problem, because it means that the solution is not outside our sphere of control, because the solution is ourselves. Which is really cool once we remember not to scold ourselves for being the problem. And so let's see if we can provide ourselves with the best circumstances for handling whatever traps we might come up against on this inner journey by understanding the opponent, which is to say, by understanding ourselves. Let's take an inventory of our shortcomings. And so obviously the first question must be to ask ourselves, what are the main handful of shortcomings or personal character flaws that are tripping us up on this journey towards a deeper development? Just to get an overview of our own main flaws. For me personally, I think some of the main things are a lack of seriousness. Like, I often think if I just went all in on shadow work, on introspection, on acting out the things I want to act out, and finding ways of not falling into the traps I keep falling into. If I was really serious about that, my life would be much better. Another internal trap is my ego's constant attempts at taking any spiritual advance I might make and turning it into an identity, thus basically undoing all the advances I just made around this, right? Because the second the ego turns it into an identity, it has been reduced into a project of the ego instead of into a project of the spirit. Another struggle or another challenge I personally face is the lack of belief in the possibility of awakening. Like, cognitively, I know it's possible, but I think somewhere inside of me, there is some kind of insecure little part lacking the confidence to truly believe in the possibility of like an actual true spiritual awakening. Once we have generated a short list of these shortcomings within ourselves, the next step is to give them compassion, to be very, very careful not to fall in that other trap of judging ourselves on account of these elements of our personality keeping us back from awakening. We have to approach them with compassion, with a curiosity, and with a willingness to try and understand them, because it is through the understanding that we release ourselves from them, right? And that's very difficult to do if we're judging them. Judgment is, in a way, the opposite of curiosity, right? And so we generated a list, we can now look at it, and we can look at how that part of us that strives to get higher, looking maybe with a little bit of disdain at these shortcomings within us, and we have to do the opposite. We have to acknowledge them, accept them, understand them as part of us, and then we have to make love to them. That's really, I think, the right way of approaching them, with a loving curiosity, in order to see where they come from, but also in order to give these parts of us a sense of being welcome despite being detrimental. So this is a very, very important step, number 2. Give them love, give them curiosity, try to understand them, and try to see where they come from. Like, for most of us, obviously, it's childhood trauma, it might be obsolete coping strategies, all these things, all these patterns that have somehow condensed within us into this residue of unbeneficial behaviors. This one is interesting, I find. It's the alchemical approach. Approach each shortcoming as one side of a grander unit that has a positive and a negative expression. And just understand that these shortcomings are merely the negative expression of a larger structure within you that also has a positive expression. And then we can start asking ourselves, what is the positive expression of whatever shortcoming we're dealing with? Like, what would this look like if it wasn't perverse, if it wasn't pathological, but if it could actually express itself in the most constructive way? So now what we're doing is we're not trying to get rid of these parts or these dynamics or these aspects of our personality, these shortcomings. We're trying to see the divine light within them, in a sense. We're trying to understand how they could really be a force for good instead of a force for stultification in our personal growth. And this is much more powerful than trying to get rid of them, right? Because it's when you try to get rid of something, we relate to it as a kind of a problem, something that shouldn't be here. But by seeing the positive expression somehow hiding within these shortcomings, changes our entire relationship to them, from something that needs to be discarded into something that holds solutions despite not appearing as such. And so I want us to do this with all the elements of our list, to find the positive expression of them. I want you to play with the idea of what your life or your character would look like if you managed to turn this handful of shortcomings of your personality into their positive expression. Like, what would that look like? And what kind of feelings and mental states would that confer upon you? Consider journaling a little bit on this, because the deeper we go, the more powerful, of course, each step will be. Sketch out the action steps you need to take in order to make this alchemical transformation from the negative version of these shortcomings to the positive version of them? What exactly do we need to do to get there? In this way, we start to generate kind of a map, right? We start to get an overview of a path, which is a really powerful and inspiring thing to be in possession of. And the final step is the reification step. It sounds simple, and to some extent it might also be, but it certainly is not simplistic. And the final step is to reify these action steps by taking them. So often on our journey, we get stuck in this idea that we need to think. And obviously you need to think. We're doing that now. We're generating a path ahead. But the thing is really, what is development if not lived out? That's a point that I know I have missed many, many times, and I'm guessing I'm not unique in this, that after thinking comes doing, right? It is once we manifest these kinds of qualities that we long to live up to. Once we do that, we are there. But merely thinking about them doesn't really do anything in the world, right? We reify through different action, right? We change our ways and we act out these new ways. And in so doing, we are making this new way real. And so, in a sense, action is a magical tool in a way, right? Because once we actually bring it into action, we make it something that exists in the world. We make it a truth about ourselves. If we're fighting laziness, say, and we actually manage to overcome it, the second we start doing the thing, we are no longer lazy. It is no longer a truth about us, right? We are changing the story of ourselves. And so this reification step is extremely important. Finding out what the action steps are and then taking them. And if we can truly do that,